I do apologize to you guys as I've missed uploading the last couple of days due to a laptop problem, but we are back here today, and we've got some more content to do before the 2025 NFL Draft starts. Recently, I stumbled upon a mock draft while I was on Instagram, and I figured it would be a good time to talk about a mock draft. We're going to go through each and every one of these 32 selections, talk about who these players are, and my thoughts on that hypothetical pick. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's react to this mock draft. Also, I do want to give quick credit to Fantasy Football Trainer. They are the guys who ended up making this mock draft, so I thought I'd give them a shout out and go follow them for some good college football content. The sponsor of today's video, Mando. Mando was created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO was being misdiagnosed and mistreated. It's a high-performance, whole-body deodorant that you can apply literally everywhere. What's actually really interesting is that Mando is clinically proven to control odors better than a shower with soap alone. For example, 12 hours after a shower, a man's normal odor level is a 5 out of 10. With Mando, on the other hand, it is literally a 0. What's even better is they have some awesome scents, as they have 4 signature blends that include Bourbon Leather, Clover Woods, Mount Fuji, and Pro Sport. Personally, I've been using the Bourbon Leather body wash, and that is absolutely awesome. And the Mount Fuji deodorant smells so good that it has me totally confident when I walk out the door each morning. Mando is also great because it doesn't stain your clothes, it's made with skin-safe ingredients, and unlike most traditional deodorants, it's more of a pre-odorant, so it's working ahead of time. Luckily for you, Mando has made you a special offer because you watch this channel. The starter pack is perfect for new customers, as it comes with a full-size stick deodorant, a cream deodorant tube or a spray deodorant, and 2 free products like wipes or a mini body wash. And how do you do that? Well, you use the code that Mando gave me, which is SCOTTF, SCOTTF. If you want to smell good at your next tailgate, game, or any sort of event, be sure to get Mando products using my code, and you can smell like me. Thanks again to Mando for sponsoring today's video. So at number 32, they had Tyler Booker going to the Philadelphia Eagles. Booker has sort of followed the timeline that he was always supposed to, as originally he was from the state of Connecticut, but would transfer to IMG Academy. He became a 5-star recruit at one point, and Booker ended up going to Alabama and spent his last couple of seasons with the Crimson Tide. He made a ton of starts, and is currently, according to NFL Mock Database, listed as the 30th best prospect, and would be a good pick for the Eagles. Very similar to Tyler Booker, we have Josh Conerly Jr. They have him as the projected number 31 overall selection, and coming out of the state of Washington, he was a 5-star and the number 1 offensive tackle in the country. Conerly did a tremendous job while he was at Oregon over the years, and is currently listed as the 34th overall prospect, so taking him at number 31 sounds like a great pick in my opinion. At number 30, we have Walter Nolan. This guy has been talked about for years and years, as he was the number 1 recruit in the country coming out of Powell High School in Tennessee, and Nolan originally went to Texas A&M, where he was slightly underwhelming, having about 60 tackles and 4 sacks, but then he transferred to Ole Miss, and ended up having a really good season in which he had 48 tackles, 2 pass deflections, and 6.5 sacks. Walter Nolan is currently a projected first-round pick according to NFL Mock Database, and the 29th overall prospect, so this is pretty dang close. For a guy who was a former number 1 overall recruit, he has fallen a little bit, but having him go in the first round would be a really solid pick. We get our first unique story on the list, as at pick number 29, they have the Commanders taking Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. He ended up coming out of Bryan High School in Texas, and despite being listed as a 4-star recruit, he had a very limited offer sheet and decided to go to Purdue. At the time, his name was also Nick Carraway. I guess that name change eventually happened his sophomore season, and that's when he blew up at Purdue, having 50 tackles and 10 sacks, becoming one of the best players in the Big Ten. The 6'4" edge rusher decided to go back to the SEC and go home, and played for A&M, and he had an okay year. He had 37 tackles with 5 sacks and 1 forced fumble, and admittedly was slightly disappointing, but according to NFL Mock Database, it's still a good pick. He's currently a projected 40th overall selection, and while at one time he was supposed to go in the top 10, he has fallen over the last couple of months, and honestly I would take him in the second round, but it wouldn't be a terrible pick either. Number 28, we have a guy who's been flying up draft boards, and they have him going to Detroit, and that is Donovan Ezaraku. I've honestly not heard much about him until recently, but he's been blowing up. He was the number 195 linebacker in the class of 2021, and coming out of Williamston, New Jersey, nobody really saw this kind of future in him. He arrived at Boston College in 2021 and ended up having a solid couple of years there, which included 16.5 sacks and 3 forced fumbles this season. He was a breakout superstar for the Golden Eagles, and now he'll head off to the NFL, where NFL Mock Database currently has him as the 32nd overall prospect, and going at number 28 to Detroit would be a really solid pick. I like this guy, and he's going to get his own video at some point. Up next, we have another edge rusher who's had an interesting season, and that is James Pierce Jr. Coming out of Chambers High School in North Carolina, he was a 4-star recruit in the class of 2022, and Pierce was supposed to make a big impact at Tennessee, and that's exactly what he would end up doing. He'd break out as a sophomore, finishing with 9.5 sacks and 2 forced fumbles, leading many to have him as a top 10 pick going into this preseason. Unfortunately, Pierce's numbers fell off a little bit, as he only had 7.5 sacks, but he got better as the season went on. Pierce is a really good pass rusher, and according to NFL Mock Database, he's currently supposed to go in the first round and is the 31st best prospect. I think it'd be a really solid selection here, and he's a really quality player. Staying on the defensive side of the ball, the Los Angeles Rams would select linebacker Jiad Campbell from Alabama. Campbell, like some other guys on this list, was also a 5-star, as he was the number 1 edge rusher and the number 16 player in the class of 2022, coming from IMG Academy. Campbell ended up having a terrific 3 seasons in Tuscaloosa, as this past season he had 119 total tackles, 2 pass deflections, 5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 1 interception. That move to linebacker ended up being really solid, as he's the top linebacker prospect in this year's draft class, and Jiad Campbell's supposed to go number 19, so honestly, going at pick number 26 would be somewhat of a steal. And coming in at number 25, we have Josh Simmons, an offensive tackle from Ohio State, and he would be going to the Texans. This is another extremely unique pick, as coming out of Helix High School in California, the 4-star offensive lineman actually originally committed to San Diego State. Eventually, he would enter the transfer portal and head over to Ohio State, where he has started the last couple of seasons, and at 6'6", he's a really solid player, and he's currently projected as the 23rd overall prospect, and he's just a really solid lineman. Slated to go at pick number 24 to the Vikings, Starks has had a rise as a super athlete. Coming out of Jefferson High School, he was the number 4 overall player in the class of 2022, including being the number 1 overall athlete. He had that crazy interception in their first game against Oregon, and throughout his career, Starks was excellent. He had over 50 tackles in each of his 3 seasons, combined for about 6 interceptions, and had a total of 18 pass deflections. Starks was at one point supposed to go in the top 5 or top 10, but he has slipped to number 21. I think people should stop overthinking this pick and take Malachi much higher, and this would be a steal for the Vikings. Right in front of him, we stick with another Georgia Bulldog in Myel Williams. He'll end up going at pick number 23 to the Green Bay Packers. And going back in time, Myel was a 5-star recruit, the number 2 defensive lineman, and the 7th best player in the class of 2022, coming out of Hardaway High School. Williams ended up having a decent career with Georgia, but many believe he's just scratching the surface on how good he could be. He never had over 5 sacks, but he ended up having 14 total sacks and 3 forced fumbles, and combine that with extreme athleticism and a 6'5" frame. NFL Mock Database has him as the 15th overall pick. He was supposed to go a little bit higher, but has fallen in recent months, but I still think it'd be a really solid pick, and he's got a lot of potential. In front of him, we have one of the most confusing players in the draft, and that is Luther Burden III. After becoming a 5-star recruit in the class of 2022, Luther flipped between Oklahoma and Mizzou, and ended up having a really solid impact for the Tigers, breaking out in 2023 with over 80 catches for 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns. Expected to be a top 10 pick in 2024, Luther had a disappointing season with just 61 catches for 674 yards and 6 touchdowns. Bird was not used well in the scheme, was battling with injuries, and also seemed to have a motor issue. It still doesn't seem to matter though, as he has so much potential, and while at one point he was a top 10 pick, he's now considered the 35th best prospect, and it would be somewhat of a reach to take him this high. Getting back to the defensive side of the ball, at pick number 21, we have Kenneth Grant going to the Steelers, a defensive lineman from Michigan. Kenneth Grant was a fast-rising player in the class of 2022 who sort of came out of nowhere from Merrillville, Indiana. He decided to commit to Michigan, and over the course of his 3-year career there, he had a couple of really good seasons, which included 3.5 sacks in 2023 and 3 sacks in 2024. But as an interior defensive lineman, he seems to project really well to the NFL, which is why NFL Mock Database has him as the 25th overall prospect, and he's been in the first round all year. We get our first running back of the day, and that is Omar Hampton from North Carolina. This guy has absolutely blown up over the last couple of months, but going back in time, he's been really good from the beginning, as coming out of Cleveland High School in North Carolina, he was a 4-star recruit in the class of 2022. Omar had a solid season as a freshman with 400 yards and 6 touchdowns, but really took the next step in 2023 and 2024, going for over 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns in each season, and he was also very productive out of the backfield, having nearly 60 combined catches. Omar is currently the 22nd best prospect and will be one of those modern NFL running backs that I think has a very long career. At number 19, we would have safety Nick Emani from South Carolina, and you go to the Buccaneers. Going back in time, he was a 3-star recruit coming out of Irmo, South Carolina, and arrived in the class of 2022 to the Gamecocks. Nick ended up having a splendid career for them, as he had over 70 tackles in all 3 seasons while he was in Columbia, and this past season he was super athletic, having 2 pass deflections and 2 pick sixes. Yes, he didn't maybe have the best numbers in the world, but he makes plays, he's super athletic, and that's why NFL teams are in love with him. And according to NFL Mock Database, he's the 26th best prospect in this draft class. At number 18, we have our next receiver, and that is Tedmarco McMillan from Arizona, and he would go to the Seahawks. McMillan was a prodigy coming out of Servite High School, and playing alongside some of his teammates, originally went to Oregon before flipping over to Arizona. This was a huge get for the Wildcats, and Tedmarco did nothing but produce. In his 3 years with the Wildcats, he became their best receiver in school history, as he had 90 catches for 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns in 2023, and had an incredible performance against NAU this year, but ended up only with 700 yards and 8 touchdowns due to an inept coaching staff and a little bit of lackluster quarterback play. McMillan is a 6'6" freak of nature who can do literally everything. I think he's the best receiver in this year's draft class, but currently he's the projected number 11 overall prospect, and this would be a steal to get him that late. Another interesting name is Shamar Stewart, who would go at pick number 17 to the Cincinnati Bengals, and he's an edge rusher from Texas A&M. Honestly, I did not know a ton about Shamar, but he was a 5-star recruit and a top 10 player in the class of 2022, coming out of the state of Florida. He's done a solid job while he was in College Station, as the 6'6" player is ultimately mostly a freak of nature, as he never had more than 1.5 sacks. I gotta be honest here and say I don't really like this pick that much, and I have no idea why he's the number 16 overall prospect, but I'm sure it's due to athleticism and potential projectability at the next level, but I'm going to give a hard pass on taking him that high. At number 16, we have another big-time offensive lineman in Kelvin Banks Jr. Coming out of Summer Creek High School in Texas, he was a huge get for Steve Sark when he came to town, and he ended up becoming one of the best freshman linemen in college football history. I thought Banks was super solid over the last 3 years, and as he declared for the draft, he's fallen off a bit, as he's currently ranked at number 13 and was originally a top 10 pick, but this is a tremendous get for a team at number 16, and Banks is going to project very well to the league. At number 15, we have edge rusher Mike Green from Marshall, and he would be projected to the Falcons. This is one of those players that I am absolutely in love with, as coming out of high school, he was only a 3-star recruit and decided to commit to Virginia. There was some controversy surrounding him and his time and why he left Virginia, but he ultimately transferred to Marshall, had a really solid 2023 season, held off different big portal offers, and then blew up in 2024 with 17 sacks and 3 forced fumbles. He became one of the best players in Marshall football history, led the country in sacks and TFLs, and this guy is going to be a stud at the next level. NFL Mock Database has him going at number 17, and that is a perfect fit for him. There are a lot of solid tight ends in this year's draft class, and Coloulston Lovelund is one of them at pick number 14 to the Colts. Loveland was a 4-star recruit coming out of the state of Idaho, and during his time in Ann Arbor, he's done nothing but produce. This past season, he had nearly 600 yards and a career-high 5 touchdowns, and has been seen as more of a pass-catching tight end than a blocker, and would be a really solid weapon for the Colts. NFL Mock Database has Loveland as the 18th best player, and he'd be going a little bit higher here, but I like the fit for the Colts who desperately need a good tight end. Texas has a lot of players in this year's draft class, and corner Jawon Baron is another one. Currently, he is a projected top 15 pick, and coming out of Austin, Texas, he was a 4-star recruit and was a part of the class of 2020. Baron has definitely waited his turn for the Longhorns, and it definitely paid off for him. He had 74 tackles in 2022, but in 2024 he blew up into one of the best corners in the nation with 67 tackles, 1 sack, and 5 interceptions to go along with 11 pass deflections. Jawon Baron has become a superstar, the top corner prospect in this year's draft, and is supposed to go at number 14. He also has blazing speed, and I like this pick a lot. At number 12, we have one of the fastest rising players in the draft, and that is Matthew Golden, a receiver from Texas, and he's projected to the Cowboys. He's one of the highest rated players to ever go to the Houston Cougars, and Golden ended up having a solid first 2 years there. He had 38 catches both seasons and a combined 13 touchdowns. He decided to transfer to Texas for better opportunities in 2024 and became their best weapon. In total, he had 58 receptions for 987 yards and 9 touchdowns, and he's seen as a speedster who's going to project well at the next level. An NFL mock database currently has him as a number 20 overall prospect, so taking him this high would be a bit of a reach, but I do think he is definitely worth the pick. At pick number 11, we have Will Johnson, a corner from Michigan, going to the Niners. Will Johnson's been talked about for quite some time, as he was eventually a 5-star recruit in the class of 2022, coming out of Grosse Pointe, Michigan. Will Johnson decided to stay home and became one of the best players in college football during the 2023 season, finishing with 27 tackles, 4 pass deflections, and 4 interceptions. Johnson was seen as the top guy, but he ended up struggling with injuries in 2024 and had a bit of a fall off. He still projects extremely well to the next level, and according to NFL Mock Database, he's currently the 12th overall prospect, so this is about where I expect him to be. The top dog tight end in this year's draft class comes in at number 10, and that is Tyler Warren. Coming in of Atlee High School in Virginia, Warren was only a 3-star recruit in the class of 2020, but absolutely blew up during his time at Penn State. He eventually took over as the top guy in 2024, finishing with over 104 catches for 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns. The guy is sort of a phenom, and something could be a lot like Brock Bowers. Currently, according to NFL Mock Database, is the 9th overall prospect, so taking him at number 10 would make a lot of sense. At number 9, we have a quarterback prospect in Shadur Sanders. I don't have to share his story. He's the son of Dion, was a 4-star, and went to Jackson State for a while. He started 2 seasons at Colorado, throwing for nearly 4,200 yards in 2024 with 37 touchdowns. Shadur has a rocket for an arm, is a ton of fun to watch, and definitely projects to be an NFL player. Again, there are some question marks surrounding him, and some wonder if he will be a bust. I don't know. Shadur is projected as the 6th overall pick on NFL Mock Database, so the Saints getting him at pick 9 would be a steal for sure. At number 8, we have Jaylen Walker from Georgia. And I can't remember the last time that Georgia didn't have a couple of defensive players go in the first round, but going back in time, Jaylen was a 5-star recruit coming out of Salisbury High School in North Carolina and was a part of the class of 2022. Walker ended up finally breaking out in 2024, finishing with 61 tackles and 6.5 sacks. He's another one of those linebacker edge rusher hybrids, and Walker's currently supposed to go at pick number 10. Could be a little bit of a reach to take him this high, but I think he's also a hidden gem and just scratching the surface on how good he can be. I have got to be honest. At pick number 7, we have Arman Mebo of Missouri going to the New York Jets. I never thought this guy was going to go this high. As you all know, I'm a Mizzou fan, and coming out of Lee Summit North High School, Mebo was a 4-star recruit in the class of 2022, but again, this was never supposed to happen. I believe he didn't allow a single sack in 2024 against SEC play, and he went from a guy who was supposed to go in the 2nd round to potentially the top 5. He's now the number 8 overall prospect, and I'm seeing him as high as number 3, and it's just crazy. He's an athletic freak who's a really good offensive lineman, and in my opinion has major bust potential, but could also be a superstar. At number 6, we have Ashton Genty, a running back who would be going to the Raiders. This would be a tremendous pick for them, as going back in time, he spent some time in Europe and the state of Texas before he ended up blowing up into a borderline 4-star. Genty blew up his sophomore season back in 2023 with 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns, but this year he tried to become the best running back of all time, running for 2,600 yards and 29 scores. In my opinion, he was snubbed to the Heisman, but he should go number 6 overall, and NFL Mock Database totally agrees. I think he's going to be a superstar in the league, and so much fun to watch. Crazy fact is that Mason Graham played both with Tedmarco McMillan and Noah Fafita at Servite High School, and Graham was a 4-star in the class of 2022. He obviously went over to Michigan, and then this past season, Graham ended up having 3.5 sacks. He's just like Kenneth Grant, an interior lineman, and Graham is someone who I guess the NFL is absolutely in love with, as he's supposed to go number 4 overall, and in this draft they have him going number 5, but he's a consensus top 5 pick, and he's someone to watch out for. It seems when it comes to offensive linemen, scouts know exactly who the guys who are going to get drafted are. Myel Campbell, like many of the others on this list, was a top 10 lineman in the class of 2022 and decided to go to LSU. Some sites had him as a 5-star. He ended up balling out in his 3 years at the Tigers, and Campbell's currently projected to go number 5 overall, but in this mock draft at number 4. Either way, I guess he's seen as the top lineman and someone that every team wants to get their hands on, including the Patriots. We're now getting to our final 3, and at number 3 we have Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter has been flying up draft boards recently, and at some points, people have had him as the number 1 overall pick. That might be a little bit high, but coming out of high school, he was listed as a 4-star recruit, and Abdul ended up having a monster 2024 season. We sort of saw his rise in 2023, but this past year at the Nittany Lions, he had 68 tackles, 4 pass deflections, 2 forced fumbles, and 12 sacks. The guy can pretty much do everything, and that's why scouts are in love with him, and they call him Micah Parsons 2.0. Honestly, that's not a terrible take, but he might end up going higher than Micah, as according to NFL Mock Database, he is currently listed as the number 3 overall player. This guy is going to be a freak of nature. I gotta be honest, I do disagree a bit with pick number 2, as Travis Hunter is selected to go there. Coming out of high school, the former number 1 overall recruit originally decided to go to Florida State, but he would then flip to Jackson State and go there for a year before following Coach Prime to Colorado. We all know his story. He became a two-way standout, played more snaps than pretty much anybody else, and was a dynamic athlete who won the Heisman. I'm not doubting this guy's insane ability, but where on earth is he going to play? Is he going to be a corner? Is he going to be a receiver? I don't know. Is it worth taking a guy like that at number 2? I don't know that either. NFL Mock Database has him as the second best prospect, but honestly, I would take him more towards the back end of the top 10 or in the teens until he figures out what he's actually going to do. That's just me though. And last but not least, the number 1 overall pick is supposed to be Cam Ward. He also has a tremendous story, which I've talked about many times, which includes being a 0-star recruit, going to Incarnate Word, balling out for 2 years, spending 2 years at Washington State, undeclaring from the draft, and then transferring to Miami, where he was the frontrunner for the Heisman until his defense failed him. He threw for 4,300 yards and 39 touchdowns and checks pretty much every box. Some say he struggles with turnovers, and some think his mechanics could use work, but either way, he's seen as the number 1 overall pick, the best franchise quarterback in the class, and a guy worth investing in. I honestly agree. So yeah, today we went through a mock draft, which had 32 different projected selections, and I went through who the player was, my thoughts on the pick, and how it stacks up. But what do you guys think? If you're an NFL fan, what do you think of these picks? What are your projections, and who is your most underrated player? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all of the videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.